Picture this. You wake up one morning, turn on the news, and something has gone wrong. It doesn't matter what, a supply chain breakdown, a regional disaster, a sudden economic shock. You drive to the nearest grocery store, and what you find stops you cold. Empty shelves, bare aisles, people pushing past each other, grabbing whatever's left. The bread is gone. The salt is gone. The basics you assumed would always be there vanished overnight. This isn't a hypothetical nightmare. Most of us watched a version of this play out in 2020. We saw the footage. We lived it. The panicked crowds, the stripped shelves, the now legendary toilet paper wars that became a symbol of just how fragile our sense of security really is. But here's what's interesting. While most people were scrambling, a quieter group of individuals stayed home. They didn't fight over the last roll of paper towels. They didn't refresh delivery apps at 2 in the morning. They were calm because they were ready. Not because they'd gone overboard with bunkers and gas masks, but because they'd quietly, practically stocked a specific set of items that most people never even think about. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on exactly what those items are. 12 overlooked, affordable, unglamorous essentials that experienced preppers had already secured and that disappeared from store shelves almost immediately once things went sideways. By the end of this video, you'll know what they are, why they matter, and how to store and use them so that the next time uncertainty hits, you're the calm one. Welcome to Secure Pantry, the channel where practical knowledge meets real life. If you find value in what we share here, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making content like this. Now, let's get into it. Let's start in the kitchen, because this is where most people think they've already got things covered. A bag of rice here, some canned goods there, maybe a few extra boxes of pasta stacked in the pantry. And look, that's a reasonable start. Calories matter. But here's the problem. Calories alone won't carry you through a real disruption. Morale matters, variety matters, and the ability to actually cook and preserve food from scratch, that matters more than almost anything else, and most people are completely unprepared for it. Take bread. Think about what bread means, not just as nutrition, but as comfort, as normalcy, as something warm and familiar when everything else feels uncertain. Now ask yourself honestly, if store shelves went bare tomorrow, could you actually bake a loaf? Most people would say yes, assuming they have flour, but flour without yeast is just powder. It's dense, flat, and depressing. The ingredient that transforms flour and water into something real, something that rises, something with texture and life, is yeast, and almost nobody stocks it properly. Smart preppers don't buy yeast in those little grocery store packets that cost $1 each and contain maybe enough for 1 or 2 loaves. They buy bulk instant yeast, 1-pound bags that cost just a few dollars and contain enough yeast to bake hundreds of loaves. The key is storage. Yeast is a living organism, and if you just leave it in a cupboard, it will eventually lose its potency. But sealed properly, frozen in an airtight container, or packed in a Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber, bulk yeast can remain fully viable for years. Some preppers report theirs lasting a decade or more without losing strength. Beyond bread, that same yeast opens the door to pizza dough, sweet rolls, flatbreads, and fermented foods. In a barter scenario, a fresh loaf of bread becomes extraordinarily valuable when your neighbors are eating cold canned beans for the 5th day in a row. Don't be the person sitting on 50 pounds of flour with no way to make it rise. Now let's say you've got the baking covered. Let's say you also have a garden, or you're planning to grow one. That's excellent. But here's a vulnerability that almost nobody thinks about until it's too late. You can grow an impressive harvest, tomatoes, green beans, corn, squash, a genuine abundance. But if you can't preserve that harvest, it will rot within days. Canning is the answer, and the critical single point of failure in the entire canning process is not the jar, it's not the ring, it's the flat metal lid, the part with the rubber seal that actually creates the airtight vacuum. These lids are single use, 1 jar, 1 lid, 1 time, and they are made by only a handful of factories worldwide, which means the moment demand spikes, supply evaporates. This is exactly what happened during the pandemic. Canning lids became impossible to find for months. People with full gardens and empty shelves couldn't preserve a single jar of food because they couldn't find a lid. The solution is simple but requires thinking ahead. Buy lids by the sleeve, not by the dozen. Think in terms of hundreds, not tens. Stock both regular and wide-mouth sizes, and seriously consider investing in reusable lids. Brands like Tatler or Harvest Guard cost more upfront and require a bit of a learning curve, but they last indefinitely. In any prolonged crisis, a lid you can use over and over again is not just convenient, it's priceless. Now let's talk about something even more fundamental than bread and canned vegetables. Let's talk about meat preservation, because when the power goes out, your freezer becomes a countdown clock. Whatever's inside will last maybe a day or two, and then you're facing a decision. Eat it all immediately or watch it spoil. The answer that humans used for thousands of years before refrigeration existed is not the fine iodized table salt in a cardboard cylinder. Bulk, coarse, pure sodium chloride, the kind you can buy in 50-pound bags from feed stores or hardware suppliers for almost nothing. Salt preserves meat by drawing out moisture and creating an environment where bacteria cannot thrive. To cure a large quantity of meat, think a whole hog, a side of beef, a serious catch of fish, you need pounds of it, dozens of pounds. A household shaker of table salt is completely inadequate for this purpose. Beyond meat preservation, salt is essential for fermenting vegetables like sauerkraut and kimchi, which are themselves incredible long-term food sources packed with nutrition. It's critical for tanning animal hides if you're working toward genuine self-sufficiency. It's a dietary necessity. Your body literally cannot function without sodium. And historically, salt was so valuable it was used as currency. The word salary comes from the Latin word for salt. In a world where supply chains have collapsed, that ancient reality can return faster than you'd expect. Buy it in bulk, store it somewhere dry, and this part is critical, because salt that gets wet doesn't just clump, it becomes a useless hardened brick that's difficult to work with and impossible to measure accurately. Keep it sealed, keep it dry, and you'll have one of the most versatile and essential survival resources available. Once you've addressed food, the next frontier is something most preppers underestimate until it's actively threatening them: hygiene, health, and the invisible enemies that move in when systems break down. These aren't exciting topics. Nobody makes a dramatic YouTube thumbnail about borax, but ignoring this category is one of the most dangerous mistakes a prepper can make, because sickness, infection, and infestation can undo every other preparation you've made. Let's start with something that most people overlook entirely when building their emergency supplies: vitamins, specifically the micronutrients that your body requires to function and that are almost entirely absent from a basic calorie-focused emergency diet of rice, beans, and canned goods. Scurvy, the disease caused by vitamin C deficiency that ravaged sailors for centuries, is not some ancient, irrelevant illness. It can develop within weeks of a diet devoid of fresh produce. Vitamin D deficiency weakens bones and devastates immune function. A full belly with the wrong nutritional profile is not the same as being fed, and this is a gap that a simple, inexpensive supply of multivitamins completely closes. Here's the practical reality. A large bottle of quality multivitamins costs a few dollars, and stored in cool, dry conditions retains effectiveness for a decade or longer past its printed expiration date. For under $100, you can stockpile enough vitamins to protect an entire family for years. That is an almost absurdly good return on investment for your health security. Pairing those vitamins with a case of hydrogen peroxide turns your medicine cabinet into a genuine first aid powerhouse. That brown bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide sitting in most medicine cabinets is already doing far less work than it could. In an emergency context, it becomes indispensable. It kills bacteria, viruses, and fungi on wounds, on surfaces, and on medical tools without leaving behind toxic chemical residue. Diluted properly, it works as an oral rinse that fights infection and prevents dental abscesses in a world where you may not have access to a dentist. It can be used to purify water in a pinch. It kills mold on surfaces, which matters enormously for respiratory health when you're living in a closed, damp environment. Buy it by the case. Store sealed bottles somewhere cool and dark. At the price point of pennies per bottle, it is one of the highest value items you can add to your emergency supplies. Now, while vitamins and peroxide protect you from biological threats you can't see, there are chemical threats to your stored supplies that are equally invisible and equally destructive. Moisture is one of them, and most people dramatically underestimate how much damage ambient humidity does over time to ammunition, tools, seeds, documents, and packaged food. This is where Silica Gel becomes your silent guardian. Those small packets you've been throwing away every time you open a new pair of shoes or a bottle of vitamins, save every single one. Or better yet, buy bulk Silica Gel by the pound. Placed inside storage containers, bags, and cases, it absorbs moisture from the surrounding air and prevents the rust, degradation, and spoilage that would otherwise occur. What makes Silica Gel particularly valuable for preppers is that it's reusable. Spread it on a baking sheet, put it in a low oven for a couple of hours, and it releases all the moisture it has absorbed, ready to go back to work. A small investment in Silica Gel protects a much larger investment in everything else you've stored. The other invisible threat is pests, and borax is the answer most people walk right past in the cleaning aisle without a second thought. Borax is a naturally occurring mineral compound that has been used for a century as a cleaning and pest control agent, and it is extraordinarily versatile. Mixed with sugar, it becomes a highly effective bait that kills cockroaches and ants by disrupting their digestive systems. It enhances the cleaning power of laundry detergent, which matters when you're washing clothes by hand without access to modern appliances. It prevents mold growth on surfaces. It deodorizes. In metalworking applications, it functions as a flux for welding.
Borax lasts indefinitely as long as it stays dry, costs almost nothing per box, and solves a remarkable range of problems that emerge when normal sanitation services disappear. Which brings us to a topic that most people don't want to think about but absolutely need to: rodents. When garbage collection stops, when restaurants close, when food waste accumulates in neighborhoods without the usual sanitation infrastructure, rats come. They move fast, they breed faster, and they will find your food supply with terrifying efficiency. A single rat infestation can destroy months of carefully stored provisions in a matter of days, and the diseases they carry make them genuinely dangerous. The solution is not complicated, but it requires stocking the right equipment before you need it, not after. Heavy-duty snap traps, sized for rats specifically, not the smaller mouse traps, are silent, mechanical, battery-free, and can run continuously without any attention. They are reusable, simple to set and maintain, and in a serious infestation, you'll want many of them deployed simultaneously. And yes, for those willing to face the full reality of a desperate situation, rats have historically been consumed as a protein source by populations facing genuine scarcity. That's not a pleasant thought, but it is a pragmatic one, and smart preppers don't flinch from pragmatic truths. The final category is the one that tends to surprise people the most, because these are items that seem trivial in normal life, things you throw away, or laugh at, or never think twice about. But in a real, extended emergency, the people who stocked these items will have solutions for problems that everyone else is still trying to figure out. Let's start with light, because light is not optional. When the power goes out for a day, flashlights are fine. When it goes out for weeks or months, flashlights become a problem. Batteries run out, bulbs fail. Modern LED technology is wonderful, but it is entirely dependent on a supply chain that may not be functioning. The oil lamp is a technology that has illuminated human civilization for thousands of years, and it works with almost any liquid fuel: kerosene, vegetable oil, rendered animal fat, even certain alcohols. But the oil lamp requires one small component that almost nobody thinks to stock: the cotton wick. Without a functioning wick, the lamp is useless. Cotton wick comes in both flat and round varieties, costs almost nothing per roll, and with proper storage, vacuum sealed and kept dry, because cotton will rot if it stays damp, it lasts for decades. A few rolls of lamp wick represent an almost absurdly cheap insurance policy for indefinite lighting capability. In a neighborhood sitting in total darkness, the person with oil lamps burning is also the person with something valuable to trade. Now, while lamp wick solves the light problem with an elegant, ancient solution, plastic bags solve about 15 other problems with a modern one. Think about how many plastic bags pass through your hands in a given week: grocery bags, trash bags, Ziplocs, and think about how thoughtlessly most of us discard them. In an emergency context, plastic bags are one of the most versatile tools you can have. They collect and transport water. They line holes in the ground to create improvised rain catchment systems. They keep boots and bedding dry, which prevents trench foot and hypothermia, genuinely dangerous conditions in wet, cold environments. They create sterile barriers for bandages and medical supplies. They manage waste in a world without functioning sanitation. The usefulness of a plastic bag in a crisis is limited almost entirely by your own creativity, and that ceiling is very high. Hoard them. Every bag that comes into your home should have a second life before it has the final one. In that same spirit of underestimated utility, let's talk about two items that most people would walk past in a store without a second glance. The first is pantyhose. Go ahead and laugh, but the military figured out the value of pantyhose decades ago, and working preppers know exactly what they're for. Worn as a thin base layer under socks on long treks, they dramatically reduce friction and prevent blisters, a genuinely debilitating condition when you're traveling on foot over long distances without access to medical care. They function as a pre-filter for water, catching sediment and debris before it clogs your ceramic or hollow fiber filter, extending the life of your primary filtration system significantly. They can be improvised into tourniquets, slings, and splint ties in a first aid emergency. They serve as lightweight incept netting over the head and arms. They allow air circulation while protecting stored food from pests. For a few dollars, a pack of pantyhose gives you a tool with more applications than most purpose-built survival gear. The final item in this category is rawhide, untanned animal skin, and it represents something even more fundamental than a multi-use tool. It represents a mindset shift. Modern gear relies on screws, bolts, and adhesives. All of those things can run out, break, or become unavailable. Rawhide has been used by humans for thousands of years as a binding agent, a repair material, and a structural component in tools, weapons, and shelter. The mechanics are simple. Soak the rawhide in water until it's pliable, wrap it tightly around whatever joint or break you're repairing, and allow it to dry. As it dries, it contracts and hardens into something approaching the strength of plastic.
It will hold an axe head to a handle, lash poles together for a shelter frame, bind cracked tool handles, and repair gear in ways that no modern adhesive can match for durability in rough conditions. Properly dried and stored, rawhide does not rot or degrade. It is a timeless solution, available from leather suppliers in strips or sheets, inexpensive and invaluable to anyone who has learned to use it. And that word, learned, is really the key to everything we've covered today. Because none of these items are complicated and none of them are expensive. What separates the person who thrives in a crisis from the person who struggles is not wealth and it's not luck. It's the quiet, consistent practice of thinking ahead, of asking not just do I have food, but can I preserve it? Not just do I have light, but what happens when the batteries run out? Not just am I fed, but am I actually nourished? The next major disruption will not announce itself. Supply chains don't empty gradually, they collapse suddenly, and then the window to prepare is gone. The items we've talked about today, yeast, canning lids, salt, borax, silica gel, vitamins, hydrogen peroxide, rat traps, lamp wick, plastic bags, pantyhose, rawhide, are all available right now at normal prices on normal shelves without any competition. That will not be true the moment the next crisis hits. The smart prepper doesn't wait for that moment. They stock quietly, they think practically, and they build resilience before they need it, so that when everyone else is panicking, they're already calm. Not because they predicted exactly what would happen, but because they prepared for the reality that something always does. That's the mindset, that's the practice, and that's what Secure Pantry is here to help you build. One practical, overlooked, genuinely useful piece of knowledge at a time. If this video gave you something valuable, please take a second to like it and subscribe. It makes a real difference for this channel. Stay practical, stay prepared, and we'll see you in the